Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement interview show. And I've talked recently with a number of guests about the disruptions that look to be headed our way based on the evolving nature of procurement tech. But actually today I wanted to come back to the now, to the present. And so today's show is about one company's journey to identify, to implement, and then to roll out a global procurement technology platform. And so my guests today are Scott Deibert and Bart Baetens of Carlson Rezidor Hotel Group. Scott is the Senior Vice President of Procurement. He joined Carlson Rezidor back in 2012 and has a deep background in supply chain and procurement, with leadership roles at companies such as McDonald's, Arby's, Steak and Shake, and Fazoli's. And Bart is really an expert in IT and then specifically procurement technology. So he's been the Director of E-Procurement at Carlson Rezidor since 2010. He actually has 15 years experience with the company spanning both IT and then procurement technology. As you'll hear in the show, he's really taken Carlson Rezidor through a number of different iterations of their procurement tech stack. Well, I've mentioned in previous episodes that I'll be actually moderating a main stage panel and speaking at the upcoming Zycus Horizon conference that takes place in a couple of weeks' time, October 23rd to October 25th in Tucson, Arizona. And I got to know both Scott and Bart recently, as they're both actually going to be fellow speakers at the event. So when I heard about their journey to implement Zycus, I knew that they could provide some valuable guidance, not necessarily on the actual tool itself, because as you know on the Art of Procurement, it's more about the how rather than the what. But the challenges they faced, the key decisions that they made, and also the lessons learned as they embarked on their procurement technology transformation. Before I roll the tape on the interview, I do want to let you know that there is still time for you to sign up and join me at Horizon. You just head on over to artofprocurement.com/horizon. That's artofprocurement.com/horizon. And use the offer code AOP749. This is a 25% discount and it includes a conference pass plus a 2-night stay at the conference venue, the Ritz-Carlton, for $749. Alright, well, with all that said, let's get straight into today's interview. So hi everybody, and welcome to today's Art of Procurement show. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm joined today by Scott Deibert and Bart Baetens of Carlson Rezidor. So Scott and Bart, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
Delighted to be here.
Thanks. And today, actually, I want to talk about procurement technology, specifically your experience and learnings from a global procurement tech rollout that I know that you've undertaken over the last couple of years. I wanted to understand a little bit about how you planned your transition, some of the decision points that you faced, and some of the key learnings. But before we do, regular listeners to the show know that I'm always on the hunt for new ways that we can try and measure our performance with a focus leading towards value rather than just cost savings. Because I think that's really critical to really the future of our profession and how we align ourselves with our businesses. And so my first question actually was for you, Scott, based on a little bit of background reading that I did before we jumped on the call. And I noticed that when you began your procurement transformation, you measured procurement ROI using a metric called strategic value contribution, I believe it was. And so I just wondered if you could explain kind of how you measured value over and above just savings in that metric and how it kind of stuck and if it evolved over time, how you did measure value.
Sure. Well, actually, SVC is an acronym for Sourcing Value Contribution.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And no worries. No. It could be strategic as well. But it's really a combination of what strategic sourcing professionals do in terms of cost reduction, cost avoidance, and revenue generation. Mm-hmm. And indeed, how performance is measured has changed over time. While very important, we're no longer solely measured on how much we reduce costs in the business. The procurement, supply chain management, strategic sourcing function, whatever you choose to call it, is a key contributor to assuring the delivery of brand standards and simplifying operations.
Right.
And when you bring competitive products and services to the business and help the brand teams deliver their objectives to enhance the guest experience and support operations in simplifying their process, then we're delivering real value to all of the stakeholders. So those are the elements that we look to try to measure as we're putting together either new agreements in the system or working with the various departments.
So how are you able to tie procurement performance to revenue generation then?
So a couple of ways. One would be top-line generation where in our business, in the supplier relationships that we established, are we able to build a connection to their business and staying at our hotels more frequently or hosting their conferences in our hotels as one way. The other is through rebates that we can generate back to the system in terms of bringing scale and size because of the amount of growth that we have. So those things all contribute to essentially the revenue generation in our overall portfolio.
So how did the people who measure the ROI of procurement, whether it's finance, operations, obviously differs from company to company, but how did they look at, well, I want to try and measure my performance in ways other than just cost savings? Was it something they embraced, or was it something that was a little bit foreign to them?
Actually, it's been more of an internal thing from the procurement role that we have been changing the metric. The finance teams are still looking at what's it mean to the bottom line or how are we improving EBITDA. But from our side of the equation, as we continue to show, this isn't just about reducing costs. Right. It's really about bringing value to the system and assuring a brand standard. There's value in that to make sure that the suppliers aren't deviating and delivering something that doesn't represent what you want your guests to experience. So those are things that are more towards what we do within the function to assure that we're not just recognized as cost cutters that are out there.
No, and I think that's key. I mentioned it before. So our future, but it's something that we struggle with, but also that kind of has to come from within because we have to re-educate the people who measure our success that the value we can create is more than just cost savings, which is what we've kind of conditioned them to think about before.
Right. And I think a good example is also like when you look at cost avoidance. I mean, it doesn't hit the P&L, but everybody who's in this type of a role understands that if you've negotiated away a potential increase that you're facing because of the realities in a commodity index or whatever it might be, there's tangible value in that, but sometimes it doesn't get recognized as such because they say, "Well, we didn't see the effect, so really, you didn't really save me anything." It's like, okay, well then I'll let it go through, and then when you feel a little bit of that pain, we'll get it negotiated away, and then maybe you'll feel better. As
long as you can tie it to something that's a real market benchmark or something like that, it has more validity than just negotiating a couple of quotes. First price, last price.
Correct.
So, Bart, I got a question as well that I wanted to ask you before we go into your journey. And I know that I think that you're the procurement tech expert in the room between the three of us. And so I really wanted to understand, given your experience and kind of what you see going forward, what's your vision for the future of procurement tech?
Well, if you look at what procurement technology is bringing us today, then it's merely about simplifying and automating repetitive processes, right? For example, making sure that the right person buys the right product at the right price from the right supplier at the right time. Now, tomorrow we expect a little bit more from these technology platforms because we do perceive that most of the businesses have these basics under control.
Yeah.
Now, if a technology platform could bring some external metrics like market or economic intelligence in the context of our particular business and in the context of the particular role that the procurement organization plays at that specific moment, then it could give the procurement teams a better way of looking at data to take better decisions based on real-time data, really, and perhaps do some what-if analysis to mitigate the potential risks and so on. So I think the technology platform will definitely grow in that direction and becomes more, I would say, a leading set of processes rather than lagging processes. So I think it's going to be more predictive in the future compared to, I would say, very much focused on the transactional processes today.
So a lot of output being around predictive analytics.
Yep.
Is the technology there already? Or so I guess what I'm wondering is, are we the inhibitor as people to being able to do that? Or is it a technology? Does the technology have to be there first for us to embrace it?
I think as such, the technology components are there, but not necessarily used today by the procurement department. Mm-hmm. So for sure there needs to be a demand, of course, before you get these SaaS technology providers to invest in that. So definitely it depends a bit on the needs of the procurement organizations, and I think we are very much today still traditionally thinking and do a lot of these tasks manually, rather than embracing the technology. Not necessarily procurement departments are open to the technology changes and adoptions around us.
You know, if you look at a little bit of like econometric forecasting or commodity trends. Mm-hmm. So if the technology has the ability to see what we've been paying for commodity costs, pick whatever commodity it is in the past, and then you're bouncing that against what the futures markets are doing, and then you're looking at it in different scenarios to say, if my strategy is to time the market, when might I decide to take a position?
Right.
Because there's an advantageous a trend that's going on, or if my goal is to improve my year-over-year cash flow because I'm trying to see the benefits in my P&L, what might that be? Or maybe I just want to have predictability in my cost and know that I'm not going to pay any more than what I did last year, and I'm okay with kind of so bringing that kind of information and decision making to the forefront using the data that sits in the system, but also then what's happening from a market dynamic standpoint, I think is the kind of thing that I would see a lot of value that future technologies could bring to the table. We still have to make a decision of when we need to do something, but at least it's being presented to us in terms of a set of options that give us some guidance and direction on what that could be.
Do you think that we then need a specific skill set to be able to interpret that data, like a data scientist or some kind of data scientist role? Or do you think that the data will be obvious enough in itself that it will enable us to make decisions based on it?
I don't know that there would be a need for a data scientist. I think what you need are people who are able to analyze the information to say what's the best fit for the business needs. Mm-hmm. So they have to know what's happening in the business, clearly from the P&L point of view, what the expectations are, whether it's the impact of the quarterly earnings or if it's a privately held company, what their long-term strategy is. And then they're fitting that into what their decision is for these solution sets that are presented to them. And I think that's the key thing, is that people understand, if I go this way, this is what it means. If I go that way, the other way, then it means something else. And they're able to process all that and come up with the best solution that meets the outcome they're looking for.
To kind of contextualize the data, or use it based on the context that they're within, so that the business can use it to their advantage.
Exactly.
What I wanted to do today was actually, I know you've been on a multi-year procurement technology transformation journey, and really I'd like to understand a little bit more about what it was that was the burning platform to do it, but then some of the decisions you take, because I think that it's something that we often struggle with, especially when we think holistically about tech. A lot of times I see that as procurement organizations, we're implementing tech that is maybe on a solution by solution basis, if you will, or because we want to do one thing, we implement the tech to do it, and then we think about the next thing, rather than thinking a little bit more holistically about what the entire tech stack should look like, over a period of time, over a longer period of time. So the first question really for me is, I just wonder if you could give a little bit of background as to when you decided to go on to a procurement tech transformation journey. What was the situation like at Carlson Rezidor?
Well, I can tell about this from an EMEA perspective, so from a Europe, Middle East, and Africa perspective, where we have rolled out the procurement platform back in 2009 to the business. But the journey started actually before that. In 2001, the procurement department already had like a static website at that time, like a little place on our intranet where we were sharing contract information with the hotels that we operated at the time, which were about 100 hotels back in 2001. So it was sharing of static information. There was no transactional part whatsoever. Then in 2006, we took the decision invest in a central e-procurement system, so we could give the hotels the ability to procure items, catalog items out of a central web application. And at that time, we analyzed the market, and we realized that there's not really a solution out there that fitted our needs straight away, or fitted our needs within certain budgets that we had to respect at that time. We were simply not in a position to afford multi-million euro yearly SaaS fees with those solution providers out there at that time. So what we did is we did a gap analysis. We did a market analysis, and we came out to a set of solution vendors out there in our region where we operated, and at a certain moment we contracted one of them, and we at that time, that was mid 2006, we did a proper gap analysis. So they had like an off-the-shelf solution out of the box that I said, okay, this is something that you can probably use in your business. And we did a gap analysis to find out, okay, where does the shoe hurt from a hospitality management perspective. And it was then up to the solution provider to start developing the specific needs that was so much needed for our business. Now, honestly saying, that was not really a success, because what happened at the time is that it took quite some time to develop all these features that we needed. And when the solution provider came back to us, almost, let's say, 3 quarters later, we found out that it was not really to our needs, to our business needs. So there was a clear conflict at that time with the specific solution provider. So from a time to market perspective, definitely I would say a worst case scenario. We had to go back to the drawing table, unfortunately, and this is where I joined the procurement department back in 2008 to lead that initiative. So the house that was built at the time, it had windows, it had a front door, it had a roof, but they were all positioned in the wrong place. So we had to take the house down and develop it from scratch because the fundamentals were wrong. So that was a painful exercise, to be honest, and of course a conflicting situation, because you want to leverage the technology that you paid for as soon as possible in your organization, of course. Long story short, we did a soft launch in November 2009 to the business with a couple of hotels in the Benelux area. And as a business case to prove it was really working before we deployed it to the other hotels in our area. You could say that we really rolled out the platform in 2010, and it was a slow adoption, to be honest. People were not really waiting for that technology platform. They were a bit scared of it, and adoption was an issue. We can only say that we engaged the full business on that platform in 2011, where we saw a lot of transactions leading up to today, to about 2.5 million transactions on a yearly basis. So that's where we are today. It was definitely a different case in 2010. Then in 2014, as the business changed and we became a global company covering 3 territories, EMEA, US market, as well as Asia Pacific, we wanted to leverage on that technology, but it required considerable investments to expand the technology platform we had at that time. And we were also running actually on a very old technology stack dating back from 2006. Now, as a global company, you don't want to take the risk of I would say, deploying on an older technology platform, which and that was one of the reasons why we went back to the market and look out what was there off the shelf. It was very difficult to upgrade the existing technology platform to higher releases because of the level of customizations we have done to that platform. It was really a risk to adjust it, to go through higher software releases, for example, and we didn't want to take that risk. So instead, we went back to the market. Launched an RFP, and we were looking for off-the-shelf solutions in a SaaS context. And we were able to conclude that exercise and sign the contract mid-2015 with one of the technology vendors out there. And shortly after, we did a project kickoff that was September 2015. You could say that we then went back to our, I would say, meeting rooms with all the stakeholders involved and did a proper gap analysis, finding out, what is it that we need to focus on in terms of priorities, launching this new technology platform to the business. And it's all about finding out, how big that gap is and setting correct priorities. You could say that the whole development cycle to bring the application up to our level where we wanted it, ended somewhere in May 2016. So this would bring us into a position where we were actually thinking about rolling it out to the organization, which actually effectively started in August this year of 2016. We did a soft launch in Switzerland. Why Switzerland? Limited set of hotels, 6 hotels we are operating in that country. Small supplier markets. We have about 30 regional suppliers in that area, so that these 6 hotels would do business against. And then, of course, about 100 corporate suppliers that we have available to the hotel database. Mm-hmm. Different currency, different language. So a nice business case to prove that the new technology platform would be embraced and adopted quickly by people who already had a certain expertise with the procurement platform. And that has proven to be a success. And which brings us now into Q4 2016, where we are rolling out the solution to 68 countries in EMEA.
Yeah.
And we hope to conclude that by the end of this year, reaching about 5,000 internal buyers, 960 corporate and regional suppliers out there. Then that's only the EMEA market. At the same time, we are launching this platform in the US market as well. At a different pace, different market, different requirements over there. And in the long run, we will definitely also embrace it in the Asia Pacific market, mm-hmm. which is led by our colleagues in the US. So that was the synopsis of the last 15 years in a few bullet points.
So that's so you're basically on your 3rd generation of technology from when you started then.
Yeah, definitely, and we see such a big difference in terms of adoption. Mm-hmm. We cannot neglect that the technology platform that we rolled out back in 2009 versus the one that we rolled out in 2016 is completely different level of adoption. We are very satisfied on how quickly embrace the technology, and it's a matter of being intuitive. Everybody expects the Amazon experience today in the procurement platform, and that's what we have achieved so far. So people are very positive about it. The news is spread quickly, and that helps, of course, to roll it out to other countries. Yeah.
When you looked at bringing in the Gen 3, what I kind of, as I wrote down about your story, so mid-2015, you bring on your new service provider. What was the decision in terms of, well, we've invested all this money in the previous technology stack, but we know that's a sunk cost. We know we have to reinvest again. Was that an easy decision to sell because you could sell what the capabilities of the new tool would be? Or did it take some convincing to get new investment to basically start from scratch again?
Let me try to answer that one, Philip. In the Americas, back to how did it get started, mm-hmm. Our competitors were basically offering technology solutions to their properties, and we had nothing to offer our hotels. And so from the standpoint of recognizing that we needed to do something, otherwise, we were going to be kind of left in the dust. In the Americas, when I joined in 2012, Carlson Rezidor, there was little to no use of e-procurement technology, mm-hmm. Except for a few supplier portals that were used by the hotels. It was a manual process to develop system spend reports or category reports, rebate reports, etc. And we pretty much relied exclusively on supplier data to tell us what was being sold to our system. So knowing that, we didn't have anything, the EMEA market was going to need change because they were, basically end of life of their existing homegrown system. We said, look, we've got an opportunity here to try to leverage the technology needs for EMEA, the Americas, and Asia Pacific into one global platform and share in the expense, development, the learnings, and hopefully transfer knowledge across all of the various theaters. So we had two sort of independent activities that were starting to take place that we came together and said, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense for us to go off in isolation and kind of create our solutions. Let's partner up here. Let's find a way to kind of make this work for both of us, even though we have different uses for the system at that point in time. And we can then get some leverage and scale in terms of cost and everything else that is involved with the implementation. So there were some unique factors here that made it easier for us to address, the change in going into this Gen 3, because we didn't have to foot the whole bill over here.
Right.
We're sharing in that development cost and the implementation cost with our partners in the United States there and Asia Pacific as well.
And just so that I can visualize the solution that you've rolled out or you're implementing, what modules are involved in it? Is it end-to-end? Is it a suite? Or have you just looked at taking certain modules that you need?
Well, we definitely embrace the full suite now, because we did look at the market when we launched an RFP. We looked at best-of-breed solutions. So, for example, what is the best contract management tool out there? What is the best e-procurement tool out there? And so on and so on. But we quickly realized it would be, first of all, commercially not the best way to position ourselves.
Yeah.
But also from a single point of contact and making sure that you had all these modules integrated with each other, we quickly saw that was a no-go for us. So we did decide to look at full suites out there on the market, and that has proven to be the right fit for us, both from a functional perspective as from a commercial perspective.
And the interesting thing was in the Americas, we had started using some technology that helped us on contract management and sourcing events as well. In the EMEA marketplace, it was the need was really on a transactional tool for e-procurement, more or less, and as well as some other elements related to investment applications or contracts, approval process as well. So there was, the good news is we had some experience in the Americas with one set of the suite components, and then over here in Europe we had another sort of application use that was also needing to be done. So when we brought all that together, it gave us the ability to look at the technology provider that could bring us an integrated suite, because that's what we're using across the system, albeit in different areas with different parts.
Surely, from an EMEA perspective, if you looked at the modules that we have embraced and rolled out, it was definitely downstream first. So e-procurement and supplier information management, in order to support the procure-to-order process. That was key for our market here in EMEA. While in the US, it was the focus was on upstream products, meaning the focus on source to contract, and they are now embracing the procure-to-order process as well.
So when you were then, you made a decision that you were going to look at a suite rather than best-of-breed point solutions. What played into your decision-making when you selected the supplier that you did?
Part of the decision-making process here was to engage people that were in the business using the tools, and operational point of view. What was the ease of use? How difficult was it for them to kind of think through what they needed or to find what they needed? And going through the examples that we had in the RFP process and getting our demos and sitting through and just looking at it from what does this mean from a user point of view? Is it intuitive? Is it easy to use? Those are factors that drove us to ultimately making the decisions that we made. Because at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of time to train everybody on all these systems. You do have turnover in hotels. And, you're talking about kitchen staff, you're talking about housekeeping staff, you're talking about, there's movement in personnel. So what we needed was systems that were effectively intuitive in how to use them and were more aligned with what was happening in the e-commerce world of today that everybody does outside when they go home and they get on their computer. And that really helped us drive towards some of the things that we made a decision on, along with the fact that, it needed to be competitive in terms of what the cost was, the ability for the companies that we were engaging with and how willing were they to help work with us to make some customizations if needed, the time that they would implement, etc. So those are some of the aspects that I remember.
There's one more element to this, is that one of the technology platforms, or a reason to choose this specific technology platform, was also the ease of use on mobile platforms, which was something that was a key requirement from the business. You don't want people to sit behind their PCs to approve transactions or get access to information. The expectation is to do this all from a mobile device nowadays. And that was one of the key elements to choose for this specific solution provider.
It's interesting that you both talk about essentially adoption, so ease of use, which drives adoption, and so thinking about it from a user perspective.
I think that is the big difference between the two solutions, the one that we developed ourselves versus the one that we licensed now. Yeah, for sure.
So as you look back on the journey that you took, what are some of the key learnings you took out of it? Maybe what are some of the things that you would do differently if you did it again?
Well, some of the key learnings from my perspective is that we shouldn't underestimate the change management process involved in such a rollout, and it's very much market specific. For example, what we've seen back in 2009 with the financial crisis back then is that, for example, the solution was quickly adopted in Ireland. Because they had to turn around every nickel and dime, right?
Right.
While in other areas, other countries like, for example, Russia, there was no focus in it at all because the different markets, different perspective at that time. So we underestimated that a bit. That's that change management process. Other key learnings are that data quality still remains an issue, and maybe it's very much industry specific. I don't know whether they suffer from the same quality issues in the automotive or banking industry, for example. But in our industry, the hospitality industry, we really see there is still a lot of data quality in terms of let's compare a food supplier across different markets. Yeah. Not necessarily they classify products in a similar fashion. They don't have the same rich data to deliver to the procurement system, and so on and so on. So data quality remains an issue, which makes it difficult for us to map it all into I would say a trustworthy spend cube, which you can slice and dice and learn about. So data quality in our industry is a key topic.
From a data quality perspective, it's not just in your industry. I've worked in both actually financial and automotive that you mentioned, and the difficulties remain the same, particularly in the indirect spend space. But other things that you're able to do to start increasing the quality of essentially the data inputs?
Definitely, what we see is that, and that is in line with one of the next challenges, that not necessarily, for example, suppliers are onboarded on that platform, because it's very much market specific. In a supplier-dominated market, you will not have the same, I would say, engagement from that supplier in that process. Which means you have to do it yourself to make sure you have the correct catalogs populated in your procurement system with the correct data, and you need to get that data from somewhere. So in terms of improving the data quality, it means within your procurement organization you need to have a certain consistency in managing that catalog management process. You need to have administrative resources in place to manage that. And manage it in a consistent manner across. For example, our team in Central Europe, they have one way of talking to their supplier base, and that needs to be consistent with what we do in Western Europe. Otherwise, if you classify products in a similar fashion, talk about food, for example, if food gets classified in one way in one area of the business in one way, and in another area of the business in a different way, then of course your spend cube is diluted, and you have issues there. So you need to do it in a consistent manner, and that's challenging to do so.
And so you build a standard taxonomy, at least as a starting point, to then map all your spend into.
You do build a standard taxonomy indeed, and that's definitely what we have done. We have like a taxonomy reaching about 1,000 categories. Mm-hmm. However, what we see is that a food supplier in Germany who uses UNSPSC versus another food supplier in UK, for example, using a whole different classification model, right, either standardized or not, or their own classification model, we always need to map it against our own classification structure. Yeah. Which is a tedious process. Yes. So if you do not do that properly and consistent across the organization, you end up with a spend cube, which is wrong.
And it takes a lot of resources to actually pull that together, doesn't it, from personal experience? Because it's a pretty manually intensive job to do all that mapping the first time.
Which for me is one of the key learnings is you have to have dedicated and a passionate team of resources to design and implement the system.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, they'll just kind of maybe not pay attention to it and not think it's a big deal, and it leads to a lot of rework. Mm-hmm. And the other key learning for me is that you can't underestimate the time needed or pressure the timelines that have been established. In other words, trying to get it done faster, because if you start pushing on all that, it's really going to lead to errors.
I think we have to say that this whole initiative back in 2006 started off as a procurement initiative. With the ambition to give the hotels that we operated transactional capabilities. Mm-hmm. But then quickly people had different expectations, and they wanted to have full end-to-end solutions with a local ERP systems and a higher level of features that made sense in their specific context. And we could not fulfill that need at that time. So if there would be one thing that I would do differently starting over, then it would be a full end-to-end business process mapping with all stakeholders involved. And that was not the case at that time. It was really a procurement initiative-led thing, and that's one of the key learnings, that it cannot be procurement alone. It needs to be procurement, IT, finance, stakeholders in the field, but also your suppliers, your external stakeholders should not be forgotten either.
And actually, that's an interesting point. We think about working collectively, but we think about it internally. We don't necessarily think about our supply base. We think, well, the suppliers will just have to live with whatever we push out there. But it's interesting that you would really take their perspective into account as well as you're rolling out a system like this in the future. Because
for sure, suppliers have different platforms to manage nowadays. Yeah. Back in 2001, there may be one or two that they had to align with, but now there are quite a number of different solutions out there, and I not necessarily want to be in the shoes of a supplier today, integrating with all these different platforms on different standards and so on.
What were some of the keys to getting users on board? Was it all just about usability and be able to demonstrate usability so they were comfortable with it, or has there been more to your change management to make them see the benefit of actually using the platform?
It is a bit mixed, of course, because people do need to see the big picture. If you roll out such a platform in the business, people need to understand why you're doing it for. Yeah. So it's not only to help themselves, but they need to be able to see the big picture as well. That it gives a powerful set of tools to the procurement organization to, at the end of the day, provide better deals to the local market. So I think people understand that by now, because we have been running a technology platform for quite a number of years. So I think now with this rollout now, the generation 3 of this platform, it's very much focused on usability. So people were expecting a big change, a positive change, where they could quickly adopt and find their way in that system and go on with the business, right?
Right.
That's what it's all about, and it's proven that it works well.
I think the other thing for us in the EMEA is because we've got a lot more capacity and capability in languages than we've had in the past. So when you're dealing, in Russian or in some of the Nordic languages as well, it's going to be easier for the hotels to find what they want and need to order in the system that we have today than what we've had in the past. In the Americas, we have to kind of educate the hotels about what the tool is and the benefits it will bring them, because it will make their life easier, but they have to adopt a different approach to the way they've been managing the business. So the change management process is much more critical for the Americas than it is here in EMEA, because basically what we're getting is an upgraded vehicle to go and drive. And it's a lot more fun, and it's easier, and it's just a benefit all the way around for the folks that have already been using the tool.
So as you start to look to the future, I know that you've rolled out, and you're in the process of rolling this out globally. I'm sure, Bart, somebody, just from what I know of you, you've always got an eye on the future and what we can do next with procurement tech. And you talked a little bit about your vision in terms of predictive analytics, but where do you see, what's the next steps once you've implemented this platform? Are you then starting to look at different capabilities and bringing different capabilities into the fold?
I think we need to bring in the right capabilities, of course, depending on what the business needs. But in terms of getting ready for the future and adopting newer technology platforms, I think we very much need to focus on data quality. That's really where the shoe hurts, and we want to build a proper data warehouse where we pull in spend statistics not only from a procurement system but also from our invoice management systems and other attributes and arguments that we deem necessary to provide a proper not only spend cube but data cube that helps get the business better. And procurement is just an aspect of that.
So as I start to wrap up, I just had a final question, and that's when you look back on your journey, what's perhaps 2 or 3 different decision points that you took that really had the biggest impact on, kind of how the journey evolved and ultimately the success of the rollout? A couple of things that were really critical that led to where you are today.
I think the first point is that one of the, I would say, critical decisions that we had taken in that journey is that we cannot neglect that it was a brave decision to develop a system on your own, right?
Yeah.
It has been, I would say, a painful exercise, but then again, also a very good learning exercise. At that time, we did not know all the answers to the questions, which was one of the problems, I would say. But this learning exercise puts us in a position to know exactly what we want today of a future system. So we have actually capitalized on that experience very much, and you cannot make the same mistakes twice, right?
Yeah, it made you a much more educated buyer.
Yeah, definitely. And then the other decision is, of course, to move away from that platform and really to embrace SaaS technology out there, off-the-shelf products. When we were first playing with that idea, I was actually one of the non-believers. I said, okay, wait a minute, we are in a very vertical situation right now. We work in a very vertical context. We have developed something which is specifically to our needs and supports certain business processes. And transitioning to a SaaS solution, which means going horizontal, so coming from vertical to horizontal means, it could be painful as well. So it's a matter of finding out how painful that exercise is. And this is what we did. We did a proper gap analysis with the new technology provider. We talked to them and say, okay, this is what we need as a minimum requirement to go live. This is what we see as a secondary set of requirements. And they listen to us, and it's really a good cooperation and a partnership to do now continuous improvement. And so I think, the SaaS solution has definitely been proven the right fit for us.
And I would add a third one to that, which would be that, making the decision outside of a sourcing context point of view was critical, because it really made us put the focus on operations, because that's the core of the business.
Yeah.
And really trying to simplify that for operations. And so putting that, thinking about it from an operations point of view as opposed to a procurement or sourcing point of view was essential. And then getting them on board, meaning the operations team, was a factor that obviously helped us get the success that we've had and continue to have as we deploy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott and Bart, I just want to thank you. It's come to time to wrap up, unfortunately. But what I will do is, so I'm going to have some show notes for today's episode. That's where there'll be a summary of what we talked about today. That's going to be at artofprocurement.com/tech transformation. That's artofprocurement.com/tech transformation. I'll also link up to both of your LinkedIn profiles if listeners would like to connect and kind of follow up and continue the conversation. So once again, just thank you for your time that you spent with me today and for giving a little bit of insights into your journey from, taking, kind of embracing the technology that's there in the marketplace and really making it to your advantage, but also how you're thinking about leveraging it in the future. I think it's very valuable as other organizations think about using procurement tech in a more holistic manner. So thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. And thank you, Philip. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.